What is the philosophy of skateboarding? Skaters recognize voids. It is in these voids that untapped potentials present themselves. It is in this in-between state of untapped potential that is what drives the skater. A skater repurposes their environment, and in that repurposing, a transformation takes place, both to the environment and to the skater. Skating is a culture in transition in the age of transitions. In this presentation, I continue to explore Michel Foucault's concept of the Heterotopia, as well as Gilles Deleuze's concepts of assemblage theory, rhizomes, as well as the transition from discipline-based societies to control-based societies in relation to the culture and history of skating. In skateboarding culture, there are four waves in which it has progressed. In the first wave, from 1959 to 1965, it is generally considered to be a novelty. In the second wave, it gained in popularity from 1973 to 1980, but died because of lack of ability to keep parks open. The third wave, from 1983 to 1991, is where street skating was established. And the fourth wave, from 1993 to the early 2000s, is how modern parks as well as a mainstream cultural identity became established. I am mainly going to focus on the third and fourth waves as they relate to the heterotopia and the controlled society. The third and fourth waves are interconnected because the fourth wave is a direct result of the third wave. The third wave is often referred to as the skate or die or skate and destroy era. They were a subculture of self-described outsiders who took to the streets as they had no place of their own. They clashed with authorities, pedestrians, and motorists. The skaters don't participate in commerce, which bothers business owners, and they don't agree with the structure of traditional sports, which drew ridicule from their peers. Skating is seen as a form of resistance and rebellion, even if it simply angered pedestrians.
Listen, go play in your own neighborhood. Don't fucking ride your skateboard up and down with me. Alright? I'm fucking gonna call a cop on you for harassing me. Get the fuck out of here. Screw. I'm saying it nicely.
What is coming to this with you? They go on the place? What is this?
It was a mistake. I asked you to move to the side, ma'am. You ignored me.
Ollieing and falling all over public streets, sidewalks, parking lots, stairwells, and alleyways, trying to pull off increasingly more difficult tricks, became a typical sight for street skaters. Street skaters redefined public spaces by using things in different ways than they were intended. They transformed the landscape into architectural heterotopias, a place meant for one often mundane purpose and group, which is then repurposed in a surprising, sometimes utopian way by another group for a short period of time. Stairs, ledges, planters, railings, loading docks, and untended concrete ramps are all seen completely different to the street skater's eyes. This is often in contradiction to what the space was intended for, thus changing the meaning of the structures temporarily. It was through the vehicle of the skateboard and the redefinition of space that a subcultural outsider identity was forged, both on an individual as well as a collective level. Skaters explore the hidden possibilities of space and reinvent those possibilities. These hidden possibilities reveal themselves through interaction with the environment. A skater, much like a hacker or a computer programmer, is always looking for ways to repurpose their environment. A skater transforms a pool into a bowl for skating, or a handrail is now used for grinding on the board, thus unlocking the hidden potential of that environment. The skater both simultaneously transforms the environment and is transformed by it through the act of skating. A skater pushes the boundaries of what a space can be used for. A skater sees a space in the same way that a computer hacker sees an iPod. A computer is capable of doing many things as long as you have the potential to unlock its hidden capabilities, and the computer hacker knows this. They never view technology at face value. They always see the untapped potential of any device or program. They look for its weaknesses in order to repurpose the technology. For the street skater, the technology of hacking the streets is the skateboard. It is through the use of the skateboard that the environment is able to be hacked and repurposed for the skater's own use. The authorities in many communities started to see this form of environment hacking as a destructive nuisance. Street skating became increasingly difficult to do because of the hostility they faced from the authorities, who would arrest them and confiscate their boards. It was for this reason that skaters started to become more interested in park skating. A skate park is a safe place where a skater can practice and not be confronted by authorities. This led to the fourth wave, where skating became more commercialized and normalized in the mainstream through things like the X Games. Skating became co-opted by the government and corporations. There were now sanctioned skating areas and non-sanctioned skating areas. Clothing and video games were also marketed in a more mainstream manner. Entire industries have been built up around skating, both to promote it as well as to sanction it. Skate barriers are a visible sight around most cities. Anti-skate barriers are a bit like anti-hacking software. Areas where skaters like to hack the environment get patched like a weakness in a security system. This forces them to change their behavior and find new areas to skate. Skaters were then forced into the political process in order to have skate parks built or sanctioned by the government, as DIY parks became more common as well. Skating also threatens the use of space in similar ways that the homeless do. They use man-made spaces in ways that they are not intended to be used. In some cities, there have been anti-homeless barriers built to deter homeless people in the same way that anti-skate barriers deter skaters. Skater culture in the fourth wave has also made an attempt at trying to be accepted in the same way that other sports have been accepted. A lot of newer skaters are in a more controlled environment where you can be coached. Parents like the idea of a sanctioned environment like a skate park so their kids don't have run-ins with the police. With the introduction of the X Games, skating became more of a spectator sport. The competition element became graded on a rigid technical scale. The fourth wave also brought the dream of becoming a professional skater, having commercial success, making a lot of money, and becoming a celebrity. Boston, Massachusetts has had an ongoing tension between the skaters and the city for years. Boston and most cities on the East Coast of the United States are more conducive to street skating. The city for many years did not have a skate park, so places like Copley Plaza, the Aquarium, and the Financial District was like their park. The Financial District in many cities seems to attract many skaters because of the modernist and postmodernist architecture. There are a lot of strange postmodernist sculptures that look very inviting to skate on, such as a sculpture known as Sudden Presence by Beverly Pepper, installed in 1971. It says on publicartboston.com, Sudden Presence might remind one of the Egyptian pyramids, yet its ramp-like planar forms also bring to mind the elevated highway, I-93, that once bisected this urban landscape. As you walk around the sculpture, its shape changes markedly, as you may find that it evokes other associations. A lot of these modernist abstract sculptures are put into public spaces to get people to question their association to their environment. A skater already associates their environment in a different way, so it seems fitting that skating would lend itself to abstract sculptural forms, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Artist Raphael Zarka also noticed this connection between skaters and modern art sculptures. He put together a 152-page book of 74 black and white photographs of skaters skating on public art sculptures in different cities around the world. The book, titled Writing Modern Art, took him 10 years to source the photos from different magazines and places around the web. He left the pages blank of the artists who didn't give their permission, but kept the printed caption there as a joke. Before the book was made, there was a video he made prior by the same name. Zarka received a good reception from the conceptual modern art crowd, saying they actually love to see public art pieces written by skaters, because the purpose of public art is a major question that conceptual art actually addresses all the time. It is part of this type of art's essence. A lot of these spaces are supposed to be psychological for the businessmen in order to see potential in things, and the skater shares this on some level, only in a more physical sense. This is also tolerated on some level because of the aggressive nature of business. Businessmen are told to go after potentials in an aggressive way and have a killer instinct. The skaters provide a visual for attacking these potentials by taking risks and being aggressive. Boston and other cities have grown less tolerant of the skaters in recent years, though, by putting skate barriers on areas that the skaters have used for many years, like the fountain area in Copley Plaza. A skateboard is harder to police than other countercultural activities like graffiti because it is a vehicle like a bicycle or a scooter. It is harder to ban because it is a mode of transportation. So skate barriers have become the city's solution to something that they see as a problem.
Alright, we made it. End of the day. It's Copley Square. Classic East Coast Boston spot. It's been skated for years upon years, and they just recently knobbed it.
The Lynch family skate park was built in 2015 after 20 years of petitioning the city to build one. The park has a lot of spots of reference from street skating in Boston when it was in its early days. There is a nod to Copley Plaza at the entrance with a picture of a tortoise and a hare. There is a location called the Volcano, which is a replica of where Boston street skaters used to skate at the Boston City Hospital, but has since been demolished. There is also a replica of a triangular block that used to be in the government center area. It is a dreamy mixture of the old and new. You also have a nod to skating's origins. Skater Canton Russell comments on the Lynch family skate park's bowls. And the pool tile really makes it feel authentic, like a real backyard pool. It feels really good going around the tiles and hearing the clicks of the tiles. Skating has been compared to assemblage theory. Manuel de Landa, cited in European Graduate School 2012, defines the more traditional conception of whole as one determined by an interiority of parts, which prohibits their disengaging from the totality, and contrasts this to exteriority of parts, in an assemblage which allows parts to unlock from the whole and recombine. From this perspective, the whole may be greater than the sum of its parts, but the part is sometimes greater than the whole, insofar as change happens between parts that have disengaged from the whole. The skateboard itself can be considered an assemblage with parts that are able to unlock from the whole and recombine. The basic design of the skateboard has remained the same, yet The individual parts have changed to create new forms of skating. For example, the design of the deck has changed several times over different generations and keeps changing. You have different types of trucks and wheels you can get for skating different environments and in different ways. The way you can adjust the equipment and create different types of tricks and styles of riding the board is seemingly endless. Also, you have different styles that have emerged, such as old school and new school. New school supplanted old school with the ollie, but in the current era, you see skaters mixing the two styles. You have the ability to balance seemingly contradictory forces with the different generations of skating, simply by the mutating nature of the structure of skating. An assemblage is any number of things or pieces of things gathered into a single context. An assemblage can bring about any number of effects: aesthetic, mechanic, productive, destructive, consumptive, informatic, etc. Skater Rodney Mullen describes a skate trick as a series of movements and sub-movements because tricks are too complex to be directed completely by the conscious mind. Once a trick is established, it becomes second nature, like turning on a light switch. A new trick can emerge in between the disengaged parts of the learned trick through analysis and feeling. Street skaters take a minimalist approach to doing tricks, and in this way they recognize voids. These voids are potentials that emerge between things. These movements and sub-movements can then be divided and reorganized to create new habits.
But when what makes the trick for you is finally you pack all that stuff for granted and you forget about it, and you're focusing only on, or I am at least, you're focusing on only one aspect of where my eye is and my back shoulder is at the time I see the edge of the table. And then everything else is taken for granted and runs autopilot. But as long as I can control that one and get a good nose wheelie from the start, I've got it. And that's how it works for me. Stack, 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 bracket and put like a tablecloth over it and focus on this last little bit, and that's what does it.
Bill Schaefer, author of No One Standing Above You, Rodney Mullen, and the Ethics of Innovation, writes, "The capacities of our body seem to be determined at any point by predefined possibilities of movement, each controlled from a center of command and pulled by a single string, but in reality, the hands pulling the strings are themselves pulled by other strings. These controlling strings can now be disconnected and reconnected, allowing for the formation of new movements, new habits, new degrees of freedom for the flesh and blood puppets that we are." Skateboarding is exactly this serious and joyful form of self-puppetry. It seems impossible to say whether the human controls the puppet or the puppet controls the human. Both are simultaneously God and puppet. Artist Rafael Zarka has also created a project based on three-dimensional models developed by 19th century Arthur Moritz Schonflies. Schonflies was a master of geometry and crystallography. Zarka was intrigued by the sculptural potential of these plaster models that Schonflies had created. Zarka made large-scale reconstructions of these models and reappropriated them for skating. The project was called Paving Space, which was the same name as the models created by Schonflies. These sculptures offer new possibilities for how skate parks are designed, as well as how public space is designed in general, especially if these pieces are movable. The project comes close to the idea of the designed heterotopia. Heterotopias aren't designed necessarily, they just happen spontaneously, like how street skaters reappropriate a bench. With projects like Paving Space, the possibilities of a dynamically changing environment open up. Skateboarding culture is different than how traditional sports like baseball form themselves. In team sports like baseball, you have a social structure that is akin to a tree, that you have a central root system that serves a hierarchy of authority with an owner, a general manager, coaches, and other staff, as well as the players. In skating culture, you have a structure that is more like a rhizome. A rhizome, unlike a tree, does not have a central root system. Instead, it is akin to ginger root or crabgrass. It resists having a hierarchical structure. Skateboarding has no coaches and does not identify itself as a team. It is an individualistic practice that is non-linear in structure and has no rules. Rhizomes are always in the middle, much like the voids that emerge between things when inventing new tricks of skateboard puppetry. Skateboarding culture reads like a map, in that it is something that is always open and can be entered into at any point, regardless of age or skill level. Once you master the most basic trick in skateboarding, the ollie, the tricks that branch off of the ollie expand outward. Once a new trick is established, it then becomes a foundation under which new tricks can be invented. If a skater invents a new trick, that trick is then given to the community to experiment with simply by establishing that it's possible. VHS tapes and the internet has helped to intensify the rhizomatic proliferation of different tricks, allowing users to analyze and correct their tricks, as well as enabling other people to learn these tricks from having seen them performed, establishing the tricks as foundational. Photography and video has a spatial function, identifying a particular space and implicitly or explicitly an emotional connection to place. Skating is something you do individually, but the more that the individual contributes to skating, the greater their contribution is to the skating collective community. Many skaters skate by themselves, but are seemingly paradoxically driven to contribute to a collective community. The feeling of being an outsider thus becomes a collective experience, creating a sense of belonging. The skateboard becomes the medium of a shared international and multicultural language that is spoken and built upon through the variation of different tricks. Skaters gain respect for their innovations by allowing them to be mutated by others. According to The Secret History of the Ollie by Craig B. Snyder, a skater by the name of Jeff Dewar invented the Ollie Air, which he called the Dew Air at the time. Alan Gelfand had taken the trick and popularized the Ollie by being able to land it consistently. Rodney Mullen took the Ollie Air and popularized the trick on flat ground and freestyle. Nadas Kappas and Mark Gonzalez had taken many of Rodney Mullen's freestyle tricks, such as the Ollie and the Ollie kickflip, and repurposed them for street skating. From this, wall rides, handrails, and fire hydrants were all incorporated into street style. Tony Hawk also saw Mullen's freestyle tricks and translated those tricks to vert ramp skating.
I learned finger flip layers on vert because I was inspired by Rodney doing it. And I wanted to take some of these things that he was doing and try to learn them in the air, in the pools. That was the first one I did that was directly linked to freestyle.
Mullen, being a freestyle skater, was forced to switch to street skating after freestyle died out, and as a result built on top of the framework laid out by Nadas Kappas and Mark Gonzalez. Many of the tricks that Mullen established in this period, such as the dark slide, are now seen as foundational for street skating.
A little bit, maybe I'll take a little vacation or something, you know what I mean? There's none of that for him. It's like, video part's done, I got this new trick I want to try.
This is where skaters share a commonality with the open source community as well as the hacking community on the internet. An open source program will often be developed by an individual, and then someone else will take that program and innovate it or repurpose it for something else. The hacking community will also share information with each other in order to have more sophisticated methods of getting into different systems and programs. Skaters are like space hackers in that they reveal unexpected connections and affordances in the environment in the same way that computer hackers see technology. Hacking is both a resistance to control and an expression of it. Both hackers and skaters reinterpret the designed world and repurpose it in ways that it was not originally intended to be used. Deleuze and Guattari write of rhizomatic systems. In this model, culture spreads like the surface of a body of water, spreading towards available spaces or trickling downward towards new spaces through fissures and gaps. The surface can be interrupted and moved, but these disturbances leave no trace, as the water is charged with pressure and potential to always seek its equilibrium, and thereby establish smooth space. Skating is in a strange state at the present, where it is seen simultaneously as forms of sport, the mainstream, commerce, as well as forms of subculture, oppositional identity, and anti-commercial activity. You have a mixture of third and fourth wave skaters that tend to blend the two mindsets. It blends the two mindsets together as a perfect anti-sporto sport. Skate parks are able to blend the seemingly contradictory tendencies of subculture and commercial mainstream tendencies through the act of skateboarding.
What's up, dude?
It is the body of knowledge and competence to skate that the culture is built on. Skating, in a sense, is the perfect anti-marketing market. Similar to assemblage theory, skating's roots as anti-establishment and anti-commerce is now blended with commercial interests. Skating is a culture in transition for the age of transitions. Perhaps it is the void, this in-between state where tricks are invented that skating is able to exist in its current form. With the introduction of the skate park, you have a trade-off. There is less harassment by the authorities, but in turn the space is less dynamic and changing. Part of the thrill of street skating is to find a new area to repurpose for skating. This is lost at the skate park because the environment was designed specifically for skating. There is no repurposing involved. Some of the more unique elements at the Lynch family skate park, for example, are a result of street skaters being innovative and repurposing their environment. There is a chain-link fence around it at the moment. It is most likely temporary, but it did draw comment from some of the skaters, joking that it made the skate park look like a prison. This is why many of the skaters who go there still enjoy street skating. It is the act of discovery and interacting with a new environment with a skateboard that is part of the appeal of skating. Just seeing whether or not you can skate a particular area is part of the creative process. The skate park can become a heterotopia, but only in a limited sense. It leaves the participator in charge of determining the best terrain within the park to execute evolved moves. And it is then that the skate park becomes a heterotopia. The skate park is still part of the heterotopia of the city as well, but it is a sanctioned space of otherness. Deleuze writes that society is in a state of transitions in order to move from a disciplined society to a society of control. Foucault wrote that in a disciplined society, people's bodies and minds were trained to conform under strict methods of control that were predictable and penetrating. This type of organization ensures that populations will govern themselves through the threat of surveillance and subsequent punishment. Workers are geographically linked to their places of employment, and consumers purchase items in the confines of various physical markets. Monotonous and repetitive tasks were the norm in disciplinary societies. Deleuze of Foucault discusses a societal shift following the disciplinary societies that coincided with the emergence of neoliberalism. Societies of control can be understood as an evolving form of discipline that moves beyond enclosed structures and outward into sophisticated networks of entangled systems. Control and freedom function within an increasingly interconnected technological and surveilled world. They operate in open systems and networks. Societies of control provide freedom in that people can move around more, as well as work and communicate in more flexible ways. People living in societies of control often find it difficult or even impossible to find a way to disentangle themselves from professional and interpersonal communication. Being able to multitask in a dynamic and changing environment is the new normal. The idea is to move from spatial isolation to constant communication, from assembly line to network, from docility to mobility, from individual to dividual, from discrete enclosures to continuous tracking, from identity to debt, from modulating according to fixed norms to incessant modulation. Deleuze writes, "Control is not discipline. You do not confine people with a highway, but by making highways, you multiply the means of control. People can travel infinitely and freely without being confined, while being perfectly controlled." It is in this environment that skateboarding culture exists. Tricks in skating are not just about the skater or the environment, but the coupling of the two is what shapes tricks. A knife affords cutting only in relation to something else. There needs to be something that cuts and something that is cut. It is these things that happen in between which is important. Skating is different than other sports in that there isn't an energetic conception of motion. Traditional sports have effort, resistance, with a starting point, a lever like running or shot put, or hitting a baseball, but in skating it is less focused on a point of leverage. Deleuze had made some observations on surfing being perhaps an element of a control society in its most subtle of forms. Skating culture developed out of surfing culture, so it's not hard to make a comparison between the two. This was significant because of its ability to bring the sport inland to the suburbs. Skating, like surfing, takes the form of entering into an existing wave. Skating has sort of a standing wave. Pulling off a trick or entering into a skate ramp is like putting yourself into orbit. The idea is to get into something rather than you being the origin starting point. You need to throw yourself into a wave generated by your own body, as well as get into a wave generated from outside your body. Centering isn't fixed, but provisional, interactive, and fluid. Video games were introduced into fourth wave skating culture through games such as the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series. The environments within games are determined by the programmers. This is similar to what Deleuze observed about surfing being perhaps a subtle form of control. The player is put into a controlled environment, much like a wave. The player throws themselves into this environment simply by turning on the machine. Many skate parks have a street section which simulates a street skating environment, and the video game simulates both. The appeal of video games is the ability to express certain types of freedom not available in the built environment. As the ability of street skaters to skate the streets started to diminish, the game became a form of escapism. You don't have to worry about being injured or arrested or both. The game gives the player an artificial sense of freedom by giving them exaggerated skating abilities, but is overall limited in that freedom. The player is given access to a large library of moves that were invented by skaters, but the player is limited to a certain set and subset of moves and combinations. Skating, in a sense, is a series of automated tasks because you have to learn new habits through repetition, but now these habits, such as the ollie or the kickflip, are automated by the computer. The player is able to improve and progress in skill by unlocking different abilities and moves, but this is artificial. This was another way of getting skaters off the streets and putting them into more controlled environments through a carnivalesque appeal. The object is not to reach any particular state, but simply to keep the game going through a series of short and decisive matches by reaching predetermined goals. By 2004, the series had shifted into something that was more akin to the show Jackass rather than a pure skating game. The Tony Hawk series lost popularity after they introduced a poorly designed electronic skateboard with no pop or wheels and was unintuitive in general. It is also interesting to note that there was a game called Thrasher Skate and Destroy that had much less of an arcade feel to it. Even though the game was a commercial failure, the skaters who knew of it actually preferred it over the Tony Hawk series because of the difficulty and the layout of the trick system. This trend towards realism was continued in the Skate series, but many say that the Thrasher game is actually more realistic in many ways. Skating games have lost their interest in recent years due to poorly designed games and the popularity of other types of games. There are now attempts at trying to gamify skating in other ways. I noticed there is a trend where you can hook different types of sensors to your skateboard and track your tricks through mobile apps. Synchro and Rideblock are two companies I have found that sells these devices. Capsule Skateboards have also said that they are developing sensors inside their skateboards for the same reason. With the normalization of skating in the mainstream, you see that skating can be co-opted in a similar way that hackers are co-opted. A good hacker is often hired by a large corporation in order to patch their systems in the same way that skating has become a global commodity, despite the fact that skating is a form of creativity that escapes the rule of money. These types of subcultures have in some ways led to tighter controls on society in general, with this cat-and-mouse-like game between the authorities and the subcultural elements of skating and hacking. The skaters attempt to control and repurpose their environment, and that environment is also shifted in order to accommodate this idea. The question becomes, what will skaters do in the face of this? Could skating represent a new emerging form of mobile control or resistance to it? Are they in the cradle of control, or are they going to adapt new ways of pivoting out of the gap of the control system? Only time will tell. The question lies in the distinction between position of centering and process of centering. How are you shaping the environment, and how is the environment shaping you? The skaters repurpose their environment for skating, but the environment is also repurposed for skaters. If skating and sports like it replaces the traditional sports and becomes the conventional sport, is that not a signifier of a shift in the system? If modern civilization is being shifted over from a disciplinary society to a control-based society, and the control is free-floating, then mobility becomes a form of control and the ultimate ruse of power. But centering yourself in a dynamically changing world can also be an affront to the system of control, where the center is always shifting. Bill Schaefer writes, skateboarding may be a form of counter-discipline that resists control. The ethic of skateboarding hybridizes the models of discipline and control. It says, relate yourself as individual, but constitute yourself as an individual. Individuate through total devotion to a particular task, as in the disciplinary model, but a task that ceaselessly mutates itself, and which is done for its own sake, for nothing. Become a source of movement, but movement of a very specific kind, experimental movement without rules or fixed norms. As skaters, we may be puppets, but at least we can say there is no puppet master standing above us.
What's going on? Somebody's trying to call me.
me on video, will you? Hey, look here. Hey, it's big time Rodney Dangerfield. Oh, I'm gonna tell you. They're skating here. They're going back and forth here. I get no respect at all. Oh, I'm gonna tell you. Hey, happy holidays. Hey, look here. When I was a child, I was so ugly. I was left alone. For Halloween, I had trick-or-treat over the phone. They didn't let me come out. Oh, I'm gonna tell you. Oh, yeah. They knew me and then the master. I think some wise guy tied me in there. Oh, what do I catch up here? Oh, I get no respect at all. Hey, I took my wife to the zoo. They said, thanks for bringing her back. Oh, ho, ho. Oh, wait, they over there. Hey, Jimmy, gonna tell you. This is live on TV here. It's black and white here. Hey, it's showtime. Hey, come on. America, wake up. Come on, give it the groove.